I'll just tell my boss on the way back from lunch, I slammed into their 7 series accidentally, of course. Then I'll slide in there that I just need 2 weeks vacation. Yeah, that's a good one.
Good one for what?
It's the hack where you have to tell somebody something they don't want to hear and you know it's going to be a tough conversation. So you make something way worse and then the actual thing isn't so bad. It's a great way to handle a tough conversation.
Like manipulation 101, right?
I'm going to say that's way more advanced than 101.
Welcome to the Career Corrective, your career lifeline that gives you laugh lines with Jenny and Allie.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are continuing the conversation about effective communication at work, focusing on tough conversations.
I'd love to try out a new format today if you're open to it.
Ooh.
So, yeah, I think we just get right into the topic, but then let's take a little break in the middle to do something fun.
Like bring our listeners to Disney with us?
Ooh, yeah, we can work out a plan, but I have something else in mind.
Okay, I'm game.
All right, cool. So, first, I want to chat about the book Crucial Conversation: Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Part one talks about what makes a conversation crucial: high stakes, strong emotions, and opposing opinions.
So we're talking about holidays with the family, like a Thanksgiving situation. Is that right?
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Let's get it all out there. When I was
Oh, yeah.
4, you made stuffing and you put chestnuts in it. And I have an opposing opinion to that. I don't like chestnuts in there. And then you put water chestnuts for a crunch? I don't think so.
Wait, no.
I mean,
Please
it was
don't do
rude
that
to
to me.
say to your
Stop.
grandmother, but I mean, if she can't get the stuffing right, it ruins Thanksgiving. Let's be honest.
It does. It really
That
does.
conversation is crucial. Is that not the category we're really talking about?
I do love to talk about sides.
We're not bringing turkey into this conversation. That's going
No,
way
we're
off
not
track.
not talking turkey today.
Ooh, that's a good idea for a spinoff.
So the author talks about how most people either avoid or handle these conversations poorly, which honestly I agree. There's a lot of avoiding that I've seen or dancing around things when people have to deal with something at work like poor performance or
Mhm.
productivity issues, but then they sugarcoat it or make it too vague. So they leave with a completely different understanding of what happened.
Mm.
I have an example.
Okay.
I had this boss who was the nicest person,
Mhm.
just a wonderful human. But anytime she had to give feedback to anyone on our team, she was so careful not to offend the person. So she really never got the point across. Yeah. We had one team member who was not producing at all. I mean, she worked at a snail's pace and she just got worse and worse and
I mean,
worse.
getting worse isn't funny, but like the snail's pace is like,
No.
come on, pick it
Right,
up.
like, yes, yes. Maybe she was burnt out, I don't know, but eventually she was fired. So anytime they would meet, the boss would be more encouraging to her rather than saying, "Your numbers are far below everyone else on the team. What can we do to get you up to speed?"
Right. I had an amazing boss, and I've only talked about it's so much easier. And I think you have so many more examples of your red flag bosses that I've talked about before. But I have had a green flag boss, an amazing leader, and she was really good at getting the point across, very direct, but it always came from a caring place. And I learned so much from her because I struggled with being too nice and dancing around things early in my career. So she really gave me a template for how to do this. And I was so grateful because I learned it when I was an individual contributor so that when I got into leadership, I followed her template. I made it my own, of course, but I learned some good practices from her to do that. So when I first met with her, I was a workaholic, overworking, and she said to me in one of our first one-on-ones, "Do you think the company is going to close down without you? Are you under this misimpression?" And it was really in a caring way. And she did it to point out to me, "We appreciate all of what you do, but go on vacation." And so that was her style. The other thing that was really good about her is that she gave us proper coverage for going on vacation. I know there's a lot of bloviator bosses who tell you lip service, go on vacation, and then they really don't get you the proper support while you're out. So going on vacation just means you come back to double the workload, which is your actions not aligning with being direct and having those conversations. But she really taught me some best practices there. Being genuine and following through with her actions just made her example of how to structure the conversation so much more impactful and really helpful to me.
Yeah, I've had a few experiences where, it's like, yeah, take the time. And I'm like, I really don't want to because I know when I get back, it's going to be stressful. I get that.
Well, I think that when words don't align with actions, then it makes you discouraged and you don't want to have a direct conversation because it starts to feel like, what's the point? In the case of where you're talking about your boss who gave feedback and was essentially too nice about it, then the person who worked for them would leave with not a clear understanding. There's a lot of talk out there about watered down conversations. Have you heard this?
Yes.
That's an example of having a watered down conversation. When I had to do this myself in corporate, I talking to somebody where I didn't want to have to tell them, but giving them feedback that was negative, basically. I would always start with something positive. It just made me feel better to utilize the proper directness, but also bring in my personality. I would always tell them, these are things where you're doing so well. I would pick something that I knew was genuinely true about the person. So I'm not throwing them off or making them confused. And then I would say, unfortunately, some sort of softening transition, and then give them the data. Your numbers are consistently 40% lower than the team average. Let's have a conversation. And we would talk about it, make a plan to get them back on track and go from there. I think of it like a sandwich, which I know I use the sandwich metaphor for everything, but it's start out with the positive that's genuine, give them the data that addresses the issue, and then leave with a plan based on what they're sharing. And then you just track from there. So it's as positive an experience as possible, but it achieves the goal of clarity and alignment so that you can use that conversation to go back to move forward. And that works in reverse as well. If you are the person where the boss is addressing things with you and you know it's watered down, even though it might feel counterintuitive, it's good to go seek out, can you give me examples? Are you telling me anything about my performance? Because you can use that data to then have clarity so that you can refer back and show, I've done everything you've asked, things like that. So just important to be as positive as you need it to be, but clear. Clarity is the key.
Okay. And so would you say to leave emotions out of it and just stick to the facts or kind of like mix it up a little bit when you're having those conversations?
Yeah, I love that. So I would say that everything has its place. This is just my approach, and this is just what's worked for me. I have much better success in my interactions with people, regardless of what they are, in tackling tough conversations to bring my personality into it. And so, bringing my personality into it, the emotional part is I always want to be upbeat, confident, but kind. And I weave in those emotions wherever I can. Now, where emotions are high because someone is getting negative feedback or having a performance issue, I don't want to mix the two. It's the data is the data, but the kindness and the positivity can be in the interaction. Just because it's a stressful conversation doesn't mean you have to leave those positive pieces out of it. I would just, my rule of thumb for me is don't use the emotions, don't let the negative emotions take me off track, meaning I don't want to deliver bad news, so I'm going to confuse the person, and don't let my
Right.
positive emotions, throw it off track, but bring in the emotions of I always want to be a kind person. So where I can, I weave that in to the data-driven conversation.
Okay. I really like that approach. I feel like it's a good balance. We talk a little bit about your approach on the last episode, but I think that this really illustrates the way you communicate, and it's very effective and powerful. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I have an example of this happening
Okay.
on Jenny's list of favorites, I would say. And I think it's a lot of people's, but you're so logical in the way your brain works. You love examples. I think a lot of people do.
I do.
So I will give one. I worked
Okay.
with this person. She was on my team and she was brilliant. Well, she still is brilliant, but this is when I was first meeting her and she was joining. And she had just recently earned her graduate degree. And the first presentation she put together for team, and she was going to be the one presenting to other departments, was academically chef's kiss beautiful. It was mwah. However, I had to have a meeting with her where I wanted her to know that I thought it was brilliant and that it was the data in there, her thought process, her critical thinking, all of it. But I knew that if she presented it in the way she put it together, no one was going to listen because of my years of experience in getting people to listen in that setting, in this company setting, as far as leadership. That could feel like to the person on the other end of it that they were being criticized and did all this work for nothing. So those conversations could go in many different directions. And the recipient, I feel, could take offense to that. Can you see that if you were on the other end?
Absolutely.
I went in with my personality and I was just myself, but I committed to myself and for her benefit that I was going to be really clear about what needed to change because I knew if I didn't keep that in mind and how to have a tough conversation, that it would be putting her through that painful experience for what benefit.
Right.
I guess what I'm realizing as I'm talking about this is I always lead with my personality, and my genuine personality is I want the best for you. I'm leading you on. I'm leading you on and I'm taking you down a bad path. No, I'm
I'm telling you that I'm leading you on, which is very, it shows I have high emotional intelligence,
and self-awareness.
self awareness, and I'm a straight shooter.
I'm cheering you on is what I meant to say. But I am. I'm always cheering people on, as you know. And so that I lead with that. I guess the tip there would be pick something about your personality whenever you're having these conversations and really weave that in and lead with it and make whatever you can a positive, but work with your strengths and want the best for people. So I just said that you're amazing. This is academically beautiful. And then middle of the sandwich is the data. I've been in this many meetings and I even apologized because I guess this is another piece because we met prior to talk about as a team to talk about what the presentation should include. And I thought that I addressed the style and I owned that. I didn't do a good enough job of really translating to you my experience and data from these situations. So your work is amazing. We don't have the right audience. Told her exactly. I gave her more specific examples and then I acknowledged that this is not easy to hear, I'm sure, and is there anything I could answer for her or let's keep in touch if there's anything she needed from me. And this was not a mistake on her end. It was a miscommunication, just whatever I could add in as far as the other pieces of responsibility that were genuine. And she came back with this off the charts presentation for the meeting. The meeting went very well. And that was the beginning of our relationship. And she told me later, and she's told me multiple times because we've had a long professional relationship and we're also friends now, but told me that the trust that I built with her because of the results that she
Yeah.
saw, she saw it for herself.
That is wonderful. Your approach actually aligns with what the book Crucial Conversations suggests. You created safety so people don't withdraw or become argumentative. You started with your heart. So you focused on what you really wanted from the conversation. You avoided getting sidetracked by emotions or winning arguments, and you made it safe. Allie, let's dive a little deeper and talk about mastering the conversation. They use the acronym STATE to explain how to share tough messages without causing defensiveness. The first one is share your facts, ask for their viewpoint, talk tentatively, avoid absolute statements, encourage testing, invite different views. Can you bring this approach to life a little bit more for our listeners?
This is what we talked about in the last example that we've been walking through, but it's great to give the steps from the book. When you're using this, think about your context. Is this your first conversation with the person about an issue, or is it your fifth conversation?
Right.
In the
Okay.
beginning, you'll probably want to hit the steps more pointedly, but part of the reason for that is when you ask for their viewpoint and talk tentatively, where you're saying, this is the way I see it, maybe I'm missing something, you're giving all of that room for them to share because it creates clarity for the tough conversation, but it also serves as reference points to go back to. Because if you think about this in a real scenario at work, you're going to be addressing issues with somebody, and you want to make sure you get as much out on the table as possible. Because then, once you put things in place to be able to help them, you want to refer back and say, you shared with me A, B, and C would be helpful. We put that in place for you. And then you can address if it's working or not.
Right. So it's creating accountability.
Yes, that is exactly right. And if you're on the flip side of that conversation, if your boss is coming to you and talking to you, you want to seek these things out, even though that might be hard to hear, but you want to get as many examples and as much data out of them as possible so that when you are doing the things that they've asked you to do because of the new support tools in place, that you can refer back to it as well. So it's just great to not only keep it neutral and clear, but it gives you a great foundation for your future conversations.
Right. Okay. Here's the curveball. Let's say you've had the discussion, you've had numerous examples, but there are roadblocks from you performing and actually doing it. How would you say, like, yes, we discussed A, B, C, and D, but yet there still are things that I can't accomplish. That's why I'm not meeting those expectations. How would you then take it to that, steer it to that direction?
Okay, let's dig in a little bit on that. You're saying you're the individual contributor and your boss comes to you and you're saying there's roadblocks that even though they're helping you with some things, there's certain roadblocks. Can you give us an
Yeah.
example of what a roadblock might be?
Okay. Let's just say you're in your performance review, and one of the reasons was you weren't meeting expectations with one area. And you've said this to your manager, hey, I've tried this approach, I've done this, but my workload is just too much. And you said you would lighten my workload, but that still isn't helping. And I'm doing everything that I can.
Okay, you're saying that if we drill down to the issue here, that the issue at the root of it is you don't have time to try or address the areas that they want you to because you're overwhelmed with your regular fundamental responsibilities.
Yes.
That's a great way to bring it to life. At that point, you're rebooting this process. Share the facts, tell your story, ask for their viewpoint, talk tentatively, and encourage testing. You want to gather your data before, if you're going into your performance review, you'll have your data. Go in with your facts, track what a rough idea of what you're doing and how much time it takes. Then tell your story, just like you did there, Jenny, to say, I've tried these things, but I can't get to them because I have too much workload. And then ask for their viewpoint and say, we've discussed this before, but at this point, since I don't have the bandwidth, I have to ask you, what is more important and what's a higher priority from your perspective? And if I don't have this time, can we reallocate some of the things that I shared as far as what's taking up my time to be able to allow for these things to truly be something I can tackle?
Okay. So after you explain all of this to them, what if they push back again? What do you say?
I would say it would be great if you could give me an example of someone else who succeeded in this way. Maybe I could talk with them to get an understanding of where they're allocating their time. Because if they have the same workload that I do and they're able to do these additional things, it would be a great way for me to learn.
I think that's very helpful.
The whole book is really addressing the fact that you're keeping it neutral, utilizing your emotional intelligence, but you're really digging in and getting into the heart of the matter. But what I think we have to keep in mind as we're utilizing books like this is there's all these pieces that exist in the real application of it. Like there's dysfunction going on, there's toxicity going on, there's fakeness going on. I mean, we hear from our listeners all the time, and we talk about it from our experience as well, where people don't do their work and they're focused on what the manager wants only. They look like they're contributing more than the hard workers. It's always vacillating between finding that point on the continuum where you can do some of those things, align your work with what leadership wants, but also stay true to yourself. And that's what we're always balancing when we really get into applying these tools. And that's what I try to really share for our listeners, is how to find that balance in a realistic way rather than in a wrap it up with a pretty bow type of way.
Later in this episode, we're going to talk about how this plays out in a toxic fake work culture, because I know there's so many of our followers that are dealing with this, but I think it's time for some fun.
Yes. What are we doing?
So, we're going to be talking about the top recipes from 2024.
2024.
Yes, I picked some that I thought we could talk about for our listeners, and then we can post the recipes.
Love it.
Yeah. All right. The top ones that I think are worthwhile from the New York Times are, we've got roasted chicken thighs with a hot honey and lime.
Ooh.
We've got easy burritos. I love a good burrito. And a one pot tortellini with prosciutto and peas. And then we also have peanut butter noodles. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Chicken thighs. I've noticed lately it's so much easier to get chicken thighs to turn out well than it is for white meat.
I know. I feel like the thighs come out juicier. You can't really screw them up,
Right.
and you get that extra crispy skin.
Yeah.
What do you think about adding lime, like fresh
I
lime?
Well, I'm a huge fan of leftovers, better than the original meal.
Yeah.
And I think that sets you up for some really nice leftover fajitas, leftover.
Yeah. Salad with it, even
Yeah.
though it could be a little dark meat. I don't know. People get weirded out with chicken salad that's not made from white meat. I know I do. I'll still suggest making it though.
Just don't serve it to me.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think that one sounds delish, and maybe we could try these out and then come back and talk about how they were. But the easy burritos, first of all, easy to make.
Burritos.
What are your favorite toppings for those?
I love it all. I want rice in there. I want refried beans, guac, a little pico de gallo,
Yeah.
sour cream, lettuce, tomatoes. I want everything in there.
I don't know, different people feel different things about it, and I respect all palates, but I want to know what you think about putting fruit in your salsa or your pico for a change on a burrito. Are you a fruit person? Is that allowed in, or more of a traditionalist of keep it classic?
Well, you know me very well, and you know I've made my mango salsa.
It's so funny when I asked you, I did forget that, and that's shame on me.
I guess you really didn't like it. It wasn't that memorable. I'm a big fan.
I
Podcast
love
over. Podcast over. That's it. I'm leaving.
Actually, I love your mango salsa, and I do remember most things in my life by food, but I forgot that you made that.
It was only a couple times I made it, so I understand. But I guess I'll have to make it for you again.
Maybe this was all a ruse for me to get you to make it again. Oh, I forget
Like,
that. Manipulation 101, the theme of this episode.
yes.
Okay, and the tortellini with prosciutto and peas, comfort in a dish right there.
Forget it. I love it. Are we doing tomato sauce with that? Or are you going more of the creamy, cheesy route?
I love how this is so our style because you have recipes and we're taking over. New York Times, step aside. These are just suggestions.
Or are we combining them? Maybe we're doing tomato and making it extra cheesy.
Maybe. I don't know what the recipe says.
Recipes, probably just with olive oil.
I just looked at it. It actually is.
It is. No, we gotta zhuzh it up.
Right. I mean, we're always going to zhuzh it up. And then the peanut butter noodles. Some people love them, some people not so much.
I love them. I want vegetables in there. Shredded carrot, some green onions, throw some peppers in there.
Nice.
Yeah, crunchy.
It's a comfort dish like mac and cheese, just with a different sauce.
Right. I like it.
And if you want to mix and match, I think you could serve the chicken dish with the side of the peanut butter
I think
noodles.
you can as well. I think if you keep the chicken, do the lime and just add a little bit of the honey.
Yeah.
But I think those flavors would go very nice together.
Same. Thank you for the snack break. I think that was a lot of fun to journey over there. And then, listeners, we will put the recipes on our social media or website. I don't know, whatever you decide, Jenny. And then maybe if you all make them, you can tell us what you think. And if you follow the recipe, we'd love to know how that goes as well.
That was fun. All right, back to our final topic to help you all throughout your week. Let's talk about how high stakes conversations are toxic or fake in the work culture versus a more productive work culture. I think people can get so worn down in these negative environments, they start to doubt themselves. So I think it's a good one to talk about.
Yeah, I've talked to people that I've coached and people that I've worked with where they're questioning, am I in a toxic workplace? They don't know for so long. And if that's where you are right now, any of our listeners, one thing to think about in these situations is, do you leave your one on one with your boss thinking, wait, did I get that wrong? Or are they telling me mixed signals or mixed messages? Or my coworker told me that my boss said this, but then my boss said that they didn't. You know, if there's any mismatch where you feel kind of hazy, you are in a toxic work environment. It comes in all different shapes and sizes. And sometimes people are very manipulative in those scenarios. So that's what makes it so draining.
Yes, I agree. Just from personal experience in the past, I used to ask myself that all the time. And then once you move to a different company or, or management changes, you'll find that you'll look back and say, "Oh, that was was toxic," or that wasn't that bad. But now for me, I've seen the difference.
That's
I clearly identify it.
That's a great point. That's what I hope we can give people, that reassurance that if you're questioning yourself, then you're probably in that environment, because if it were productive and positive or neutral, there'd be no need for you to second guess yourself. That's how it's starting, how it's manifesting. And so, like Jenny says, when you see the difference, it's like, oh, now I see
Get
how,
it.
right?
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, my boss now is so supportive and encouraging." Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is this real? Can be. Yeah.
And in those scenarios, whether it's subtle or it's overt, it's the intent of the conversation. So if you're having a tough conversation and you're in a positive work environment, both people or both parties or both sides or all parties involved in the conversation want to keep it productive. They're there to solve the problem. They're there to move things forward. If you get into the destructive conversation in the destructive environment, then they have an ulterior motive. They could be looking to make themselves look good in front of leadership. They could be trying to make you look bad. They could be just worried about themselves with no consideration for anyone else. So that's where it all breaks down, because when you're not having a straight, overt conversation and there's all this subtext and ulterior motives, there's no way to parse through, and you can't use the same tactics for both those environments.
Right. All right. How about this one for toxicity? Say I have a coworker struggling to meet deadlines because she was overloaded. Instead of helping her, our manager criticizes her in front of the teams.
I actually had a boss do that to me. It had nothing to do with my work, but it's the same type of thing where she was criticizing the fact, this is so silly, but she was criticizing the fact that I was taking public transportation to a meeting, so I couldn't drive the other people who were going. And I would have no way of knowing that that would be something she would want me to do.
Okay.
So I said something to her, something to the effect of, well, the plans have been made. If you need me to do something like that in the future, I'd appreciate it if you could let me know ahead of time so that I'd have the opportunity to see if I can accommodate. I mean, she told me when I had no way of fixing it and was just choosing to do it in front of everyone as a way to unload her steam. I kept my composure. So that would be my way of helping you, our listeners, in that situation. Just try your best to respond with composure. We've talked a lot about emotional intelligence. And in the scenario you brought up, Jenny, for your coworker, it would be something like, okay, I would love to improve, and I'd really appreciate a private conversation where we can discuss solutions. Could we schedule some time to go over workload adjustments?
I think that's very good. Okay. So you handled that really well. But what if you're really timid? What are some alternate responses you could say?
I think that you keeping your composure and just acknowledging what they said could be very simple, of even just, "Oh, okay, something very simple. Okay." And then follow up with an email later, or follow up in your one on one. Maybe you don't want to talk about it in front of other people. You just acknowledge what they say at that time. But then the email, you could really think about what you want to communicate. So it would be, I wanted to follow up on your feedback from earlier, and just make the point that you want specific guidance. Ask for examples in whatever they said you weren't doing well, and let them know that you'd love to meet briefly to better understand their expectations. And then always follow up in writing to keep a trail of that. And then if you are okay talking to them, but you want to do it one on one, you just ask them for a meeting and basically make the same point verbally. But you could also get in there if you feel empowered enough to let them know you felt a little caught off guard and want this information from them. But then you can also, if you can get up the courage, say, I'd really love it if you would address these types of things moving forward in our one on ones. Or
I love all of those suggestions. But if you're feeling extra brave, you could also throw in there, hey, I would really love it if you didn't act like a 4-year-old at the playground. I would appreciate if you could get that under control. Thank you so much.
with love.
With love, please leave me alone. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think this was a really this was a really tough one, but Hopefully, you all got some tips on how to tackle these tough conversations. I understand completely that it is something that is so uncomfortable for so many people, and it's just something that you have to keep chipping away at. But just remember the alternate options. You can always follow up in email, you can always talk to them one on one. You definitely never want to lose your cool. It's never worthwhile in my book, but especially when you're empathetic and amazing like all of you are, I understand so completely how hard this is. And it really depends on your situation. What's your personal situation? What are the other people at your workplace like? There's so many nuances that we can't get to in these discussions, but we try and just give you a foundation to springboard from, and we hope it's helpful.
And just so you know, there's always passive aggressive ways of dealing with this as well.
Can you give us some examples, Jenny? Just real quick, rattle them off.
I have a whole list.
Give us your
The
top three.
the top 3. You take their lunch out of the refrigerator and eat it and enjoy that. I don't know, you steal some, tricks from The Office of Jim and Dwight. I feel like those are some helpful tricks. Just
What
very passive aggressive.
what was the one where Jim didn't he dress as Dwight
He did.
and really mess with
You
him?
know what's a really good one is you take their cell phone and you throw it up in the ceiling if you have those office, and then you call them, and then they can hear their phone ringing.
Is that a Jim?
That's a Jim and Andy right there. Now, don't be passive aggressive. Take the high road.
But laugh along with us as we give you silly suggestions as well, because if we don't laugh at some of this stuff, come on.
Cry. We're gonna cry. Let's not do that.
We are so happy you hung out with us this week, and we hope you join us again next week.
Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.